Welcome back to another episode of STEM in Stilettos. I am Dr. Stella Kafka and I'm today's episode guest host. If you are a woman in STEM feeling stuck in your current trajectory, a tech professional considering a major career change, whether voluntary or involuntary, or a scientist or researchers exploring non-academic paths, you are in the right place. Today, I have the pleasure to speak with a very special guest, our own Zofia Morales, who usually is on my side of the table, and we will be discussing reinvention with strategy, smart career pivots for women in tech, leadership, and transition. Zofia Morales is a career strategist, founder, and the host of STEM in Stilettos. With a professional journey that began in biophysics and took her through global fintech, financial services, public sector outreach, healing work, and entrepreneurship, Zofia has lived a career path defined not by linear promotions, but by strategic shifts rooted in curiosity, values, and impact. Her first pivot was from biophysics research to global fintech and the beginning of a wild ride. She's launched multiple businesses, navigated the high-stakes world of commission-based mortgage sales, and led financial education efforts in the wake of economic collapse. She's built a deep understanding of how women can navigate professional uncertainty with clarity, intention, and power. As a career strategist and host of STEM in Stilettos, Zofia now helps women in tech and leadership do just that, whether they're re-entering the workforce, launching a business, or building a bridge to something new. Her mission is simple and urgent: to level the playing field for women founders and help close the pay gap, not just through advocacy, but by helping women design careers that truly fit. Zofia brings systems thinking, lived experience, and unapologetic real talk to every conversation. Welcome to to your own show, Zofia. It feels very interesting and very surreal, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. I'm sitting here listening to all this and going, wow, that's me. Look at that.
That is you. And just a little bit of the personal information. I was born and raised in Greece, and your name actually means wisdom. So I really look forward to the wisdom you're going to share today. And I would like to start with the first question. The first thing that comes to my mind. I love that you describe your career as strategic shifts rooted in curiosity, values, and impact, rather than just a series of pivots. So let's start at the beginning. You earned a master's degree in biophysics back when it didn't even have a formal name. What drew you to the field, and what was that early research world like?
Yeah, that was back when you had to build your own computer if you wanted to run a machine with it.
Oh dear.
And it's easy to look back now and go, oh, it was strategic and all these things. It doesn't feel strategic sometimes when you're in the heat of it. And in fact, I had my first job after my bachelor's was in molecular biology, when this was
Mhm.
before they'd sequenced the human genome, all of that kind of stuff. And it was still really early work that we were doing, moving genes from one bacteria to another, that sort of thing. So I started there because I was really curious about this leading edge of science, if you will. How do we change the characteristics that organisms are starting with? Because there's huge potential in being able to tweak your DNA in one way or another. And so that was really intriguing to me. And when I got to grad school,
Mhm.
my interest was around biochemistry. I'd learned quite a bit about the molecular genetics side of things, and now I wanted to broaden that into the larger physiology of what's going on inside of an organism.
Mhm.
And I happened to find a major advisor who used NMR to look at DNA, which is where I started. And then eventually I pivoted to another professor partway through my career. And he was looking at enzymes, which is
Oh.
the power tools, if you will, in the organism system. This is how organisms make controlled chemical reactions happen. This is how you can
Mhm.
digest your food without digesting your body. This is the equipment that allows that sort of thing to happen. And so I was really intrigued by, what do the changes in the DNA do to the changes in the protein that's made from that DNA?
Mhm.
And how do things change if you end up with something in there that doesn't belong? Okay, because that happens. And sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's not a good thing. And so I started exploring all of these questions when I was in grad school, and it was really interesting. And I got to learn a lot about computers and putting computers together because we attached them to large magnets that gathered these huge piles of data that you couldn't possibly analyze on your own. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, how often do you get to go to the particle collider? Yeah.
That sounds like a fascinating story of a scientist who has been exploring a field that hasn't even opened at that time. But at some point, you mentioned you never used your degree. So
Yeah.
walk us through that moment when you realized that the path you've been preparing for suddenly didn't make sense for you anymore.
Yeah, play around in the lab for a while. And as you're in the lab, you learn about history as you're going through different classes and this sort of thing. And I would say it was about the time I did my general exam. That's like the major step before they approve you to go do your dissertation. And you do a lot of research and stuff to get ready for this exam. And while I was preparing for this exam, I noticed a very unfortunate pattern. And it's not the fault of the researchers involved, it's the way that things are. And it's a pragmatic problem. And that is, you take the least amount of preparation and protection that you know that you need. The problem is you're researching something. You don't know how much protection you actually need of what kind until it's too late. You're really your first experimental subject in a lot of ways when you're studying things. If you look at Marie Curie as one that many people know, she worked with early radiation, was one of the pioneers in that area, and she died
Right?
of radiation exposure. The gentleman who developed the electron microscope lost fingers because he used to focus the beam onto his hand, not knowing the damage that he was causing to his body as he did that. There are other smaller examples as things go on, but as that pattern became clear to me, I went, I would really like to have kids one day, and I would like them to have all the right numbers of fingers and toes, and I would like not to die prematurely. I'd like them to have a mother as long as they can have a mother. And it became clear to me that I needed to find something that did not leave me deep in the lab, because
Yeah,
that's where the exposure to the unknown occurs, because that's where
yeah.
you're studying the unknown in a very hands-on way. And so I made the decision that I was not going to pursue a career in the lab.
What I find fascinating is that your first reinvention took you from the lab into tech in the early 90s, right?
Yes.
And you were managing global data centers for a Fortune 100 bank. So from the lab to a bank, doing, what at that time probably was cutting edge tech. And that is a huge leap. So how did you approach making that transition strategically rather than just jumping ship and moving randomly and trial and error in your life?
Yeah.
And that was
Well,
actually your first experimentation outside the science world, right?
yeah, it's like, okay, I've learned all this stuff, right? I've
Mm,
learned a lot of stuff in grad school. I know how
mm,
to clip up DNA and put it back together. I know how to sequence DNA. I know how to sequence proteins. I've learned all of this stuff. Like 98% of it, I don't want to be doing because of you can't protect against the unknown risk. And so what I was left with was, what can I use that doesn't put me in the lab, squarely in the lab? And it was computers. I
mm.
know how to troubleshoot them. I know how to build them. I know how to program. I know how to administer them. And so let's follow that path. And so it's always kind of a combination of intention and serendipity.
Mm. But
And
you didn't stick to just that. When you were in tech and you were doing all these wonderful, innovative things, you started something that will become a major theme, those brown bag financial education seminars for the data center stuff. So
yeah,
you didn't just sit in your bench or in front of your work table. You actually shared the knowledge and experience. So what sparked that and what did you learn about yourself in that process?
Yeah, what I learned about myself in that process, right? Because when you're in the data center, if you've ever been involved in tech, it's long periods of boredom sprinkled with intense moments of like panic and frantic activity. It's like if everything's going well, you're bored out of your mind. And when it's not, you don't have 2 seconds to think. And so we would have these long times where we could sit around and kind of shoot the shit with each other. And one of the things that I discovered was we're working at one of the foremost financial institutions in the world. And there's a whole data center full of people who don't know if they're getting a good deal on their mortgage, who are deeply in debt, who've been compulsively shopping, who haven't started their 401ks, who don't know how to have a budget or balance a bank statement. And irony is one of the things that hits me, as does hypocrisy. And it seemed really misaligned that you could be working for this amazing financial institution and not be financially literate in any way. And that there wasn't something built in to support that for the people who weren't like actually in the bank doing the banking stuff. So I went down to one of the branches and I said, I know you guys do these little like lunch seminar things because it's like on the website.
Okay.
And I said, I'd like to get some of these happening for us in the data center. And the branch manager said to me, well, you know, they don't really make us any money and I don't really promote that and I don't spend a lot of cycles on that. And I said, I hear you. You have objectives you have to be hitting. But consider this. Don't you think there's something wrong with this picture? And described what I just described to you. And she sat with that for a minute and said, you know what, you're right. I will bring in the stuff that we have pre-prepared. And beyond that, I will work with you to get connected with other people who can bring in additional topics. And so that's how that started. And I discovered that it felt really good to be part of that pathway, part of that conduit where people managed to begin changing their lives in really significant ways. We had 20-year-olds that started 401ks. We had folks that got out of debt and learned to start saving. We had people who bought their first houses. We had people who refinanced their houses because it was just not a good situation. There were all kinds of changes that happened because of that. And I also discovered this thing called borrowed authority because I had orchestrated this particular educational series. When it came time to do things, when it came time for advice and guidance, people would end up in my office. They're like, oh, I'm going to set up my 401k. Can you sit with me while we go through? They had a phone menu system where you could go through and say how much you wanted to put aside, where you wanted to put it, and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a bunch of people who came through my office just kind of looking for moral support as they were going through this process. And it was really fulfilling. It's like, yeah, I'm really truly making a difference to people in ways that I can see and concretely measure, as opposed to what I'm doing and operating the data center. I mean, yeah, it's great that you can go online and do your online banking, but this was different. This had a very different flavor to it.
That sounds wonderful. And I would like to discuss this further. We are up on our first break already.
Yes.
Over the break, I'd like to invite you, dear listener, to spend a little time reflecting on your own career journey so far. Think about the moment where you realized the path you were on might not be the right fit anymore. How did you handle that realization? Did you act on it immediately or sit with it for a while? And come with us. We'll be right back from the break.
Oh, shout aloud, the world here. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. No fear. No fear.
Thank you for hanging with us through the break. This is Dr. Stella Kafka, and I am back with Zofia Morales, the usual host of STEM Stilettos. Zofia, before the break, you're telling us about those early transitions from biophysics to tech and discovering your passion for financial education. But then life threw you some curveballs. You had to move across the country with your husband. You were pretty burned out from the corporate tech workload. So tell us about that transition period and how you were introduced to self-employment.
Ah, yes. I took a dead end transfer, is what happened. I volunteered for it. That's kind of the story of my career. It's like, oh, I want that. Let's go do that.
Mm-hmm.
And Citi was trying to bring their web hosting services in-house. Long story behind that. And so, as part of that process, I volunteered to be the one that went out and shut down the West Coast operations and brought them back to the East Coast. And it was really intense, as you might could imagine. But then once that was done, it's like, okay, now what do I do? And about the time that had wrapped up, the thing that took us to California, the reason we went was my husband's job. And that wrapped up at the same time. And we were like mutually unemployed for a bit, which is scary, right? Ooh, that's scary. And
where's my income?
Yeah, exactly. What do I do now? So I used a trick that had got me through college, which was I went to a temporary agency and said, give me something, right? We got to pay for the mortgage at minimum. And so I took this temporary job and ended up at a rubber factory of all places.
Okay.
And while I was there, I got to know some of the ladies who were in the accounting department. And one of them was a mobile notary. I'm like, a mobile notary? Tell me about this, right? And this was back when there was a lot of finance activity going on. This was like 05, 06. And it was a fairly lucrative side gig to run. So I'm like, okay, let me pick that up. It's evening hour type stuff. I can keep my day gig. I can do this while we're keeping the boat afloat and he's looking for appropriate work. And so that was my first little dump into the self-employment world. And the real shock to me on that was you have to market yourself. Clients don't just show up, right? I'm all certified, I'm prepared. How do I find clients?
And now what? Right.
And now what? Exactly. And so that was like the deep end of the pool on, well, how do you let the world know that you're here, that your services are available? And being an agency kind of girl, I found a bunch of notary agencies and signed up with like 1 million notary agencies. And that solved that little problem for me with a minimum amount of like sales interaction, because that was very intimidating to me at the time. I just have to sell myself once to the agency, then I've got a steady stream coming from there.
Yeah, and we don't realize that most of our professional life, personal life, is about marketing. It's about advertising. It's how we present ourselves, how we bring ourselves into the job, and how do we connect with people so that we can actually communicate with them what the value proposition is, what we're offering to them. But what impresses me is that mobile notary work, which is right in the middle of the risk mortgage product area. Liar loans, reverse amortization. That was before 2008, right? So what did you observe during that time and how did it shape your thinking?
Yeah, what I observed during that time scared the shit out of me. It really did, because I had seen, you would get these ads in the mail and it's like, you've got this $1,200 a month mortgage. We can make it $5,000. I'm like, there's something hinky here. I don't know what it is, but there's something hinky here because it has a mortgage rate attached to it. It has a clear APR. It's non-zero.
That's right.
So how are you making payments that are less than the interest even on the loan? This doesn't make sense to me. There's something stinky here. And as I went through the mobile notary training, I got a little more conversant with what was going on with that. And unfortunately, as a mobile notary, you're not allowed to provide any kind of guidance or advice. You're allowed to tell them what the document is and where to sign, and that's it. You're not allowed to comment on it. Or if they ask you, is this a good deal? You're like, I have to refer you back to your loan officer. I rapidly found I did not like that because I'm looking at this stuff and knowing that these people are going into a bad situation that's going to be perhaps hard to get out of in the future. So I rapidly became disillusioned with my little side gig because I didn't feel like I was doing anyone a favor. I was making it convenient for them to get into a bad financial situation, is what it was. And I didn't like that role. And so I began to get certified to become a mortgage originator so I could have that conversation with people. Because that's really the first time that many people learn anything about the financial world, about budgeting, about credit scores, that sort of thing. So it seemed like a really good entryway into people's financial lives to help them be a little more savvy and to get a house that they can keep through good times and bad, not just the good ones.
As a mortgage originator, though, you were on commission only work,
Yeah,
right?
commission
So
only.
commissional, right? So
Yeah.
how did that teach you about resilience and ownership in your professional life?
Yeah. Being on commission really taught me a lot about what my own personal motivations are. Because when you're in a sales commission only type environment, you'll notice that all of the metrics are very dollars in. How many dollars did you bring in this month? That does not inspire me one bit. And so I had to learn to measure my activity and my results a little bit differently to remain motivated. My boss has a sales target he wants me to hit. I'm motivated by the number of people I've touched and the number of folks that I've helped. And so I built my own pipeline as more of an educational pipeline. And so my outreach was more to, they had in Indiana things they call CDCs, which are Community Development Corporations. It's not the Center for Disease Control. And they were about revitalizing specific communities within the Indianapolis area. And it's actually a really good approach to dealing with like neighborhood blight and that sort of thing, because this isn't an external gentrification effort. This is the local community going, where do we want to see our neighborhood going and how do we make it get there? Which I think has a distinctly different flavor to it. So that was really nice for me and supportive of what I was doing. So I engaged with a lot of their efforts. I became an expert in down payment assistance programs and this sort of thing that allow people to get into a house even if they don't have a ton of savings. And with the local credit repair organization, there was a not-for-profit. They have since gone away. I was on their board for a while, which was also very gratifying, where you could learn to improve your credit, clean things up so that you're mortgage ready. So you didn't have to go for one of these subprime loans with the crazy interest rate on it. And so, yeah, I really adored doing that work. And then 2008 arrived.
In 2008 was such a memorable time for all of us.
Yes, that was when the subprime mess hit the fan. And all of that stuff I was worried about as a mobile notary came into glorious Technicolor nightmare fruition. And so I kind of specialized in getting people out of reverse amortization loans along with the first-time home buyers. So I did some of the more difficult mortgage origination out there. And 2008 hit and it got even harder. You know, there were a lot of major changes that happened in that industry that people said, well, you couldn't possibly do that. The government just said you're going to, so let's sit together and figure it out, right? So I was on a lot of those committees who were figuring out, well, how do we deal with a loan that's upside down? How do we restructure it in a way that makes sense for everybody involved? And how do we get that to go through the system? Because it's one thing to make a decision on one level, but then you send it into the system and you discover there are ways in which the system chokes on it that no one anticipated. So that was always a fun and interesting and evolving problem to have. And after having spent a couple of years in that, I got an opportunity to move completely into the customer education side of things, which made my heart even happier because now I don't have a certain number of loans I have to hit. Now I just have numbers of people reached as my metric, and that made me a lot happier.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure around 2008, where everything was crash and burning, financial literacy was pivotal to help people recover and regain their lives and livelihood. So If you are to look back, how do you see this kind of work as part of your larger strategy?
I think prior to the 2008 crash, a lot of people in the US, I can't speak to everyone, but I know, like myself, there was always this assumption that I can get a loan for XYZ, whatever it is. It's not going to be a big deal. Credit had really opened up. And there wasn't a lot of thinking about what if things reverse? What if this
Mm-hmm.
goes bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where the financial planning needs to happen. Because when
Right.
things go well, sure, there are problems that come with more money. But the really difficult one is you planned on X amount of money and now you have X minus Y amount of money.
That's right.
That's the really complicated thing and the thing you really
Right.
need to be able to prepare against. And
Yeah, and
so it
that's what
really
affects your
shifted.
livelihood. Yeah.
Yeah, it really shifted how I think about things, how I think about taking on risk in the form
Mm-hmm.
of using other people's money. It's a big term that they like to use in real estate. Use other people's money to go do the deal. Yeah, there can be some significant challenges and downsides to using other people's money, to being highly leveraged. And so it is a thing to approach with caution, which is, I think, what 2008 taught us in a lot of ways. There were people out there who had a lot of real estate investment happening, and all it takes is one refinance not to go through when you've got like an
Right.
adjustable rate mortgage. Because what they don't think about is with an adjustable rate mortgage, the rate either goes up or there's a balloon that you have to make. How many of us can pay 80% of our mortgage tomorrow out of our checkbook?
Right. Right. That's
Oh,
right.
and that's a risk that you need to think about and take seriously, because when the atmosphere in which they took it on was like, yeah, you'll just refinance it, it's not a problem, until you can't refinance. And
That's right.
that's what happened after 2008. It became really hard to refinance. There were some particular institutions that were aggressive in foreclosing
Mm-hmm.
and didn't allow a lot of runway to do the refinancing. And then, of course, they choked on it because they couldn't resell it. That was why they
That's
wanted
right.
to foreclose on it. But then they couldn't resell it for what they needed to resell it for. It was a
It
serious
was a mess.
collapse. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really was.
Oh my goodness. Thinking of everything that we discussed so
Yeah.
far, I'm starting to see how each of these experiences build on the previous ones. So you're weaving for us a tapestry of your life and experience, although at the time it felt like we had individual pieces. And right now we have a nice picture, a nice puzzle. And I would like to dig into your current methodology after a second break. At this point, I would like to invite you, dear listener, to think about your own relationship with change and uncertainty over the break. And I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario, just something to think about. Imagine you had to completely reinvent your career in the next 12 weeks. What would you want that to look like? What would you need to learn or to make that happen? Don't worry about whether it's realistic. It's just a hypothetical scenario, but lets you just dream just for a moment. We'll be right back.
Oh, check it loud, the world here. Tech is ours and we show no fear. No fear. From no fear. No fear.
Thank you for hanging with us through the break. This is Dr. Stella Kafka, and I'm here with Zofia Morales. And we have been talking about your journey through multiple career reinventions. And we gave everyone a homework assignment during the break to reinvent their career in the next 12 weeks. And I would like to give you that assignment.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to talk about that assignment because
Hmm.
looking at what's going on in the world, I fear there are a great many of us who are fixing to have to do exactly that. If you've been watching the news, there have been layoffs at Google and at Amazon and many of the other tech giants out there. And it's
Right.
masses of programmers for the most part.
Mm.
And the problem is when Google lets off a bunch of people and Meta lets off a bunch of people and so on down the line, it's like, where do all these people go to become reemployed? With AI churning out buckets and buckets of code,
Right.
it becomes it goes from an interesting thought experiment to a very real strategic thing that people are having to face, like very suddenly. And it can feel extremely disorienting. It's like, now what do I do? Nobody's hiring coders anymore. And part of the reason I wanted to take on this conversation, because this is the moment at which you really have to put on your thinking hat. And I think better with another person on the other end. It's like, here's where I'm at. This is what I'm running into. And I think there are a couple of reasons why that sort of team thinking thing is helpful to me. One is I have to really put out all of the parameters of what's bothering me, really spell out all the different aspects of the problem in a way that someone else can understand why I don't see this particular track as a solution. Because a lot of times when you talk to people, you'll get these knee-jerk reactions that it's like, well, just go to Meta. Yeah, they just laid off a bunch of people too, you know? And it's a trend that is bigger than one company right now, right? All of these companies have massively invested in AI infrastructure. And the only way you regain that infrastructure, that investment back, is by getting rid of the people, the payroll you've been paying for, to make up for the difference, right? The idea is to replace the humans who are doing the coding. So it's not like there's going to be a whole bunch of coding jobs that are going to pop up at another company, because they're all trying to do the same thing. So this is a moment of reinvention on a massive scale for a great many people. And I guess my whole chaotic impulses have kicked back in. I'm willing to help you think through this, sister, because it's really disorienting and you need an answer fast. You need an answer fast because, you know, the bills don't stop.
That's
unfortunately,
right.
And unemployment is a joke. I mean, don't get me wrong. Grateful for unemployment, every little bit of it that you get, by all means, take advantage of it and use it. But if it pays your mortgage, thank God, because a lot of times it's not enough to even do that. It's a problem that needs urgent solving. And I think that's the reason I wanted people to go through that thought exercise, because if it's not you today, thank you, Jesus, it may well be you tomorrow or next week. And so if you've done some pre-thinking before you're in that emergency panic mode, after you've gotten that pink slip, it's a lot easier to formulate a plan. You think better.
Yes, we do live in a brave new world where parameters have changed. Uncertainty is our new reality. And one of the things that you just reminded us is that no matter what kind of career path we're following, our scientific training as STEM in Stilettos is always there. It's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of organizing your thoughts and planning for a future. One of the things that I really like knowing about you is that you have a mission. Your mission is very kind of powerful, and it is to close the pay gap by helping women create income and impact on their own terms.
Yes.
How does strategic reinvention play into that larger goal?
How that plays into that larger goal is, a lot of times we have been trained as women to do self-defeating things. Okay. And it's not our fault. It's the way the culture is. It's the way our families of origin were. And we're taught to do things like hush. We're taught to prove our value before we ask for anything approximating our worth. And then if we're told no, we go, oh, okay. And we wander away. That's one of the major impetus behind doing this show. It's the impetus behind the coaching work that I do, is to help us level that playing field. Simply and purely by taking care of the shit that happens between our ears. Because we've been sold a bill of goods as women a lot of times that is self-defeating. And then we wonder why we're stuck or we're having trouble being seen for a promotion or whatever the challenge is. because we're following some unwritten rules that we may not even be aware of. And so, yeah, I like to have these conversations because it starts to bring those underlying assumptions and presumptions forward. It starts to open up the conversation to, oh, well, there are other ways we could approach this that
So for someone
work.
who's listening, they
Yeah.
work, right? For someone who's listening, one of our listeners who know that they need to make a change, but feels overwhelmed by the options and completely paralyzed by uncertainty. Because let's face it, uncertainty is paralyzing.
Yes.
What is the first step you recommend? How do we get started?
One of the first steps is to acknowledge that that has happened.
Mm.
Okay. And it can be kind of hard,
Mhm.
especially when you're sitting on the sofa with your Haagen-Dazs, hugging your dog.
Yes. Get a dog.
Streaming YouTube, right? And be a little kind with yourself when that moment arrives, because it's part of a normal processing to have this reaction to shock and awe, right? This
Yeah.
terrible thing has happened. It has exploded your world. It's normal to be overwhelmed, confused, not know what direction you're going, sorry for yourself, angry. There's a whole range of emotions that happen with it. And that's okay. Have those emotions and
Right.
even give yourself a little time to have those emotions, but put an end date on it. Okay, I'm giving myself this week. This week, I can do all of the crying and raging and journaling and whatever helps you get through it. If it's the pint of Haagen-Dazs and the dog and the Netflix, do that. But put a date on it because it's very easy to be stuck in that mode as well. And
Very
then
true.
once you've had that reaction, allowed yourself the space to have that reaction, it also clears out the headspace to really start thinking about it in more constructive ways.
Yeah.
And once you've got that headspace going, then it starts to build on itself. Like any cycle, it tends to be reinforcing. And so give yourself the end date and then switch gears. And if you're
So
having trouble switching gears, find a buddy, get a coach, get your life partner, get a good friend who will tell you the way that it is. And
so
do some talking, do some co-thinking about here's where I'm running up against this, that, or the other thing, and what are some options.
yeah. So to summarize that, give yourself permission to be human. Give
That's right.
yourself permission and give the kindness you want to give to other people. But at the very end, spring to action. This should not be paralyzing. The world is a new reality and we need to live in it.
Yeah.
So with this wisdom, with this mindset, if we could actually go back and meet young Zofia, the one who has been starting from scratch as a scientist, going to get a Nobel Prize, but then realize that that's not her life's goal, that's not her role. And she moved to finance, she moved to education, she moved to a much more human touch in helping people with their own troubles. What is the one piece of advice about navigating careers that you would give to your younger self?
That is a good question. I think one thing I would tell her, because one thing that she never knew was what she was going to be when she grew up.
Mm,
And I think that can be both a blessing and a curse. I
mhm,
always envied my peers who were like, I'm going to be a veterinarian. And they've known it since sixth grade, right? And they've been
mhm,
on this trajectory all their life. I've always envied those people. I'm going to be a
mm.
nurse. I'm going to be a doctor. Okay, great. I love that. I don't know what I'm going to be. Can I be all the things? And in a way, I have been all the things. And I think
Mm,
what I would tell her is it's okay
mhm,
that you have many interests and that you want to go deep in a lot of different places because the world needs people like you as much as it
mhm,
needs people who know they're going to be that veterinarian or that fighter pilot or whatever it is. Because it's people who are interested deeply in a lot of things that allow for incredible change to happen, that break things open in industries. You need the polymaths who do the cross pollination. And I would tell her it's okay. It's all right to be that way.
yes, and we are entering life and our professional lives as explorers. It's okay to explore,
Yeah.
it's okay to reinvent yourself. Just go towards a direction where your heart and your mind is taking
Exactly.
you, and make sure you wake up every morning thinking that, hey, life's difficult, but I can do something good for people today
Exactly.
through
Well, and
my
the
work.
the other thing I'd like to put out there is I haven't gone that far away from science because I'm
Mhm.
partners with my husband in his drug design consultancy.
There you go.
I still have an opportunity to weigh in on 2D NMR spectra and this kind of thing
See,
from
that's
time
the
to
thing.
time.
You can take Zofia out of science, but science does not come out from Zofia, and she will
Exactly.
always find her way back. I love this.
I love that science can apply so many other places
Oh, of
because
course.
when I was in corporate, one of the things that made me so amazingly promotable was I applied scientific method to just about every problem that was put in front of me. I
That's right. It's a
probably
mindset.
I probably wouldn't have told you that's what I was doing at the time that I was doing it, but looking back, that's clearly what was happening. I was
That's right.
very attached to cause and effect and identifying the foundational causation of whatever was going on. And it made
Mhm.
me amazing at improving systems.
Yeah. And you know that you're bringing this in STEM in Stilettos, this awesome podcast that is not only bringing wisdom, but also connects us in the virtual world that we bring in. So I would like to spend a couple of minutes talk about resources here. I know that you have some new programs specifically designed for people in career transition. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about those.
Yes, I've got three different levels, technically four different levels of engagement. If you're finding
Mhm.
yourself in one of these like world has blown up kind of situations, or even in one of these stuck situations, I haven't lost my job, but I'm also not getting the promotions that I want.
Mm.
And I like to engage with people at the level that they're at. And so if
Mhm.
you're one of these folks who's like, I know I'm remaking myself, I need a long term trajectory, I've got a 6 month program. If
Mhm.
it's one of these things that's like, no, I need a thought partner for an hour,
Mhm.
I have one of those as well. And you can find those. I'll put the links in the show notes to
That's
save
great.
spelling out a whole bunch of like URLs and stuff. But if you're not sure what bucket you fit in, I also do a short conversation, 30 minutes, where we can sit down and figure out what it is you actually do need. Because a lot of times we think we need one thing, and then once you start hashing it out, it turns out you need something totally different. And so
Fantastic.
it's always good to have, I find, a thought partner. And so
Great.
I
And
offer that as well.
how can people get in touch with you and learn more about those programs?
Yes, again, the links will be in the show notes.
Okay,
And so
great.
just scroll down, click the link that works for you. The help me
Mhm.
decide link is probably the one that you want if you're in that I'm not really sure moment. It's zero commitment. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, if she engages with me, she's going to sell the hell out of me. No, that's not how I
Mm.
roll. If it makes sense
Okay.
for us to work together, we'll have that conversation. But I am here to make sure that the world becomes a better place. And sometimes that doesn't mean that you engage with me. Sometimes that means you take a different track, and that's perfectly fine. No strings.
So, dear listener, we will have all that information in the show notes. So, you just check the show notes and you're good to go. So, I'm going to give you 60 seconds
Oh,
to give us some words of wisdom, Sophia. For someone who is listening and thinking, I know I have to make a change, but I'm terrified of making the wrong move. And
mm.
we admit that to ourselves more than we admit it to others. It's scary. So, what would be your advice?
My advice is this. In our minds, in our logical minds, we think there are right moves and wrong moves.
Hmm.
Okay. And I think it's very common for people to say, oh, well, if even not making a choice is making a choice. And that's true. And sometimes it's important not to make a choice, and
Yeah.
other times it's important to make it. And that's something that your gut will tell you a lot
Great.
of times.
Hmm.
And I'm one who's been challenged over the years making decisions because this is good and this is good and that's a drawback and this is also a drawback. And what I found helped me was like the 2 column method. It's like list the things and then the pros and cons of each of them. Not so much because it helped me decide. A lot of times I would go down and go, this is the obvious choice. And I would get to that conclusion, and my gut went, I don't like that.
Hmm.
That's your decision point right there. When you get to the bottom of the pros and cons and the obvious choice does not feel good, that's the data that you're looking for. And it forces me, when I arrive at that moment of, well, this is the obvious choice and I hate it in my stomach, to relook at what are the values and the assumptions behind the choices and the way the pros and cons have been presented. Because
Wow.
a
And
lot
with
of
that,
times it's the wrong premise.
wow. Wow. What a powerful way to end today's episode. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey insights with us today. It's been fascinating to hear the strategic thinking behind what could have looked like random career moves from the outside. And thank you all for joining us today. I know you have many ways you could be spending this time, and I'm honored that you spend it with us. I hope we have been of service to you. As Zofia mentioned, you can check the show notes to connect and learn more about her new programs for those in career transition. And as always, we want to hear what your thoughts of the show are, suggestions for guests and topics. And you can respond in the comments below or email us at zofiaspendingstilettos.com. And until next week, go out, be bold, be beautiful, and be authentically you.